Okay, hi everybody and welcome for a new Gelli Arts class. My name is Birgit Koopsen. I'm a brand ambassador for Gelli Arts and I'm in the Netherlands, so I was definitely not able to see the eclipse. What was it, yesterday or the day before? But I have seen one once when we were on vacation in France and it was amazing. So I hope you all experienced it. But today is all about gel printing, and I'm going to tell you about how to use your a mini placement tool with your gel plates and how it can help you align your paper and create a perfect aligned prints. So yeah, as Felicia already said, Dominique is here. If you have any questions for me, just put them in the group chat and Dominique can pass them on if she thinks that they are good questions to answer for everybody. And I hope you will enjoy this class. So let's go to what I have here on my table. So as you can see, I have here my Gelli Arts mini placement tool. This is one of the different placement tools that Gelli Arts has, but this is in my opinion, the most versatile one, as you can use them for basically any size and shape of gel plate. And yeah, so it's really handy. So I have one here that is not in the packaging anymore, and that's the one that I'm going to use. I also have out here my 5x7 Gelli Arts gel printing plate. But as I said, you can also use the placement tool with other size gel plates and even other shaped gel plates, and I will also show you how to do that later in this class. But first, I'm just going to tell you how to prepare your paper if you want to use the mini placement tool. So there are basically two options. One of the options is that you just use the paper as it is, and the placement tool is only to make sure that every layer you print is in the same position, which means that if you make, for instance, collage paper and you're using stamps and stencils and stuff like that, and you are going to do layering on the gel plate and you want to have it all in the right position, you can use the tool, and then it doesn't really matter for you where the border is and how big the border is. So then you can just use any paper, any size you like, and you only use it for that sole purpose. But you can also use it to print several layers on top of each other and have a perfect border all around your print. For instance, if you want to frame the print, or if you want to create a card that is where the print is exactly in the middle of your card, then it is really handy to prepare your paper. So what I have done here, I have a little bit thicker card. It's like the Recollection White Card, which is about 200 grams, which is quite sturdy and can be used really really well for standalone prints and also for card making. And this is the paper that I'm going to print on today. And I have cut this paper in the right size for my 5x7 plate to be exactly in the middle of the paper. The mini placement tool, the border of the mini placement tool is 1 inch, which means that if you want a perfect border all around your print, that you need 1 inch extra on each side of your plate to have it exactly in the middle. As this is 1 inch and this is 1 inch, you also have to add 1 inch on the bottom, at the bottom, and 1 inch on the right side of the plate to get it perfectly in the middle, which means that you always have to add 2 inches to the plate you're using. So that means if you use the 5x7 plate, your paper needs to be 7 by 9 inches. And if you use an 8x10 plate, then your paper needs to be 10x12 inches. I hope that makes sense. So since the plate I'm using is 5x7 inches, my paper is cut to 7x9 inches. So it's 7 wide and 9 from top to bottom. And as you can see, if I put it here exactly in the corner of the placement tool, then when I push it down, you can see that my paper, my gel plate is exactly in the middle of my paper. So that's how you prepare your paper if you want to have that perfect 1-inch border all around. That means that if you have a smaller plate like the 6x6 plate, or if you have one of the mini plates that you have to, for the mini plates, you have to measure what the size of your mini plate is exactly and just add 1 inch on every side, and then you will have it perfectly in the middle. So first I'm going to make a print in the middle of my a 7x9 inch sheet of paper, and I'm just going to build up random layers to show you how I get them all in the same position with the placement tool. And I usually start with a solid layer of color because I like to add texture in the next layers, but I don't like it when the white of the paper shows in my print. So I always make a first base layer so that when I add, for instance, my second layer and I create a texture in that second layer that makes open spaces, that I will have color already on in my first layer, so I don't see the white of the paper anymore. So if I want to use more than one color on my in my first layer, then of course I could roll out 2 or 3 layer colors at the same time on my plate, but then where they touch, they would mix. So if I would want more than one color, but I don't want them to mix, I have to add them one by one, which means I have to put my paper on the gel plate several times to cover my entire sheet of paper. So I'm going to roll out my first color, which is a very light yellow. It's the pale lemon from Winsor and Newton, and it's one of the few yellows that is actually an opaque color, and that's probably also why it's a little bit a powdery color, because there's a white added to create opacity, because normally most of the yellow colors are translucent. So I've rolled out my paint, and now I'm going to place the placement tool exactly in the corner of my gel plate, and then I'm going to place my paper exactly in the corner here of my placement tool. Then I put it aside a little bit so I have more room to rub my paper. And now I'm going to mark my paper here at the back side of the paper. I'm going to put a little cross down here. I could also do a little arrow, whatever, but I'm marking the bottom, because if I take off my paper and I would turn it around like this, not put it the same way into my placement tool again, it might not completely align, because sometimes your jelly plate is not like completely straight. There is a little bit like one corner sometimes just is a little bit out of the exact shape. And then so if you don't put the paper in the placement tool the same way every time, you might still not end up with a perfect print in the middle of your paper. So that's why I put a little mark there, so I know when I put the paper back in what the bottom is. Now let's add a second color down here. I want another light powdery color, which is Persian rose. Also an opaque color, also more like a pastel color. And I'm going to roll out this color at the bottom. And it's okay for me if the two colors overlap now in my print. Because overlapping colors look totally different than mixing colors. So I decided for this print, I don't want to mix them. That's why I do it in two layers. And together, they now cover my entire gel plate. And the print is exactly in the middle of my paper, as you can see. So now I can add more layers to this. So for instance, I want to add texture now to my background, and I'm going to use another color. And for instance, if I don't want to have this specific part of the print at the top of the bottom of my plate, bottom of my plate, then if I wouldn't have the placement tool, it would be really hard to make sure that it stays within this printed area and doesn't go outside of that printed area if I would not have that perfect placement tool. So I'm going to roll out this in the middle. And I only want to use this color on part of my print. So I'm only going to roll out part of my plate. And now I'm going to create a texture in there. And let's do something a bit subtle because I want to add even more layers. So I want the background to show a little bit, but not too much, because I want to add many more colors. So it has to be a subtle color texture, and I'm using some I don't remember the English name. The English name for this, we here in the Netherlands we call it jute, but that's probably not the English word. I'm sure it's not the English word, but I don't remember the English word. So again, I'm placing my background on my gel plate. I use the tool again. And as you could see, it's almost automatically that I just move it away when I start rubbing. And I also, I leave it there when I add the paint, because I don't want this to be covered in paint completely. So if I would have it here while I add the paint with my brayer, then there would be a lot of paint also on my tool. So I leave it there until I have rolled out my paint, and then I bring it to the gel plate and add my paper. So here you can see that I have some subtle texture in the middle of my first layer. And now I'm going to add another texture at the top and at the bottom. So let's take yet another color. And as you can see, I'm still using the lighter colors. That's because when I build up layers, I like to work from the lighter colors to the darker colors. Because if you do a lot of layering and your colors are not completely opaque, then the color, the layer that's underneath will change the color that is that you put on top. My chair is going down. And if you put a lighter color on top of a darker color, you will not see as much contrast than when you do that the other way around. So personally, I like to work from light to darker colors. Although with the colors that I used here, because they are all opaque, I could have done it the other way around. But then you have to be sure that your colors are like really opaque. And even if you have an opaque color, when you use very light, very thin layers of paint, even some of the more opaque colors will turn a bit translucent. And you can imagine that if you have a layer of purple on your paper and you put an opaque, or you put a layer of yellow on top, that the yellow would not be its own bright yellow, but it would be changed because of the purple that's underneath. But when you do it the other way around, when you have yellow first and you put the darker purple on top, then the purple will actually contrast with the yellow that's underneath. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So let's add yet another color and yet another texture. And again, I'm still only in the second layer, so I'm still only going to add those lighter colors and the subtle textures. So I have some lace here that I'm going to use. And now I need some paper to push that down and create the texture in the paint. And all of this I'm just doing while my tool is still somewhere back there. And now, just before I add my paper, I'm putting the tool in the right position. And there's my second. I don't think it's complete yet. Now it's sharp, I think. My second texture, and I want another texture down there, and I might try and do the yellow down there. As I said, this is an opaque color, so it might actually work. And let's see another not too bold texture to put there. How about just some bubble wrap? So here I'm working with mostly found materials and handmade stamps and tools today, but of course you can do this also with texture plates and with stencils. Everything you can just buy that's made for crafting and gel printing. But I also really like to use whatever I can find around the house and outside in the garden, and like packaging material, all kinds of things that don't cost any money but make great textures. So here we go. So now I have my second layer, and I want to cover up part of this layer, and I want to use circle masks. And then again, I'm going to use my tool to get them in the right position. So I have some masks here, smaller and a little bit bigger circles. These are made, some are made just from paper, like the same kind of paper that I used for this print. And some of them are made from a Duralar sheet, which is more like a plastic sheet. So they usually last a little bit longer, although when you use a sturdier paper for your masks and you have several layers of paint building up on them, then they last a long time too. They will also not just tear as easily as when you would use a copier paper or something like that. So now I want to use a little bit darker color. As I said, I want to cover up part of my background, so I need a color that it doesn't have to be necessarily darker, but at least it has to be an opaque color. So what if I would want to use, for instance, this color, because I like it very much, but this color is a translucent color. What I like to do is to apply a layer of white first. The white is an opaque color and will cover up all the areas that I don't want to see shine through my blue color. And so that means that I have to actually add two colors to create this color in my next layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide where I want my circles to be. And I'm using my my stick, my scrapbook adhesives repositionable tape. So I can use this to put the circles where I want them. I'm sorry, I just have to, one moment, please. As you might have heard already from my voice, I have a cold. So sometimes I have to cough and then I will just mute myself. I'm really sorry about that, but I really can't help it. So I'm going to decide where I want my circles, and I'm just going to use my repositionable adhesive to apply the circles to my background. Now, it's really important, and I haven't really checked, but I think it will be okay, that this first layer of paint is completely dry, because otherwise it might come off when I remove my circles. Sorry. And that's, of course, not something that we want. I have one more here. Let's just add it. Okay, so as I said, I would like to use this color to cover up my the background around the circles. So the areas where there are no circles, I want to cover it up with this color. But this is a translucent color, which means that I need an extra layer to cover up my background, because otherwise I would see all of the texture shine through this layer. Maybe you like it that way, and then you can just go ahead and just print this layer on top of this layer. But I want it to be a little bit more opaque, so I'm going to use white first. So I'm going to roll out my white layer. like this, and then use the tool again. Make sure I have the bottom in the right place and place this on top. I rub it well because the circles are quite thick paper, and I want to make sure that I go all around the edges of the circles. Make sure I cover all of the rest of the area, open area around the circles. And as you can see, when I pull up the print, that some of the circles already came off because the repositionable adhesive is not that strong, which is good, of course, because we don't want it to rip the paper when we remove them. But because I'm going to add another layer, the blue layer, I want to make sure that I put the circles back in the exact same position, to make sure that I don't cover up those circles in my next layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the circles from the plate and put them where they belong on my print again. And there we go. So make sure that all of them stick to the paper again. Now I can, of course, I can clean my plate and move on to the next print. But I always really like to use the leftover paint on my plate. To pull the leftover paint from the plate, I either have to be really quick and put some paper on it straight after removing this print, while the paint on the plate is still wet. But because I put the circles all back on the paper and I took my time and I talked a little bit, this is not wet enough to pull it directly, which means I need another layer of paint to pull up this leftover paint from the plate. But I can't add that extra layer of paint while this is still a bit wet, because if this paint is still wet and I add a next layer, then I will just mix it. So it has to be either completely wet or it has to be completely dry before I can do something with it. But it looks like this is already dry because it's so thin and it's quite warm in here. So I'm just going to use that color that I also want to use for this one and pick up the leftover paint on the plate. And because the white is the one that I used is from Amsterdam, titanium white is an opaque color, it should actually show on top of the blue. And as you know, when you do gel printing, the layer of paint that goes on the plate first is the layer that's going to be on top of your print, because it's all going to be turned around, right? So when I pull my print, the white should show up on top of the blue. So I'm going to roll out that layer of blue paint. And as you can see it really well here in this print, how translucent that paint is, that you can actually see the white circles shining through this layer of paint. Again, I want this print in the middle of my paper. So even if I do a layer print, or I build up several layers on the plate and then just do one pull, I can use the tool to still get that one print in the middle of my paper. So I don't have to do, it's not only handy when I do several layers, several prints on top of each other. It's also handy when I do build up several layers on the plate and then pull it as one print, because I can still make sure it ends up exactly in the middle of my paper. And here we go. A very simple, but I can do all kinds of things, fun things with this print. And personally, I think it would have been a waste to just take a baby wipe and clean that paint away from the plate. I really like to have that base for maybe adding more layers, adding stenciling on top, or use just paint markers like Posca markers, for instance, and doodle and draw on there. And then I can work some more on it. Now back to this one. So before you add a new layer on top of the white paint, it's also important that that white layer is also dry. Because if your paint is still wet on your paper and you try to pull another layer of paint on top, then you will not pull all of the paint from the plate, because wet paint simply can't pull up wet paint. The paper needs to be completely dry in order to be able to pull up that paint from the plate. So to make sure that this is really dry, I'm just really quickly going to dry it with my heat gun, because it felt still a little bit moist. Sorry. I'm really sorry. One little moment, please.
So while Brigitte is getting herself together, we just want to thank everybody for being here and taking time out of your day to join us and continue to look at our website for any upcoming classes.
Thank you so much, Felicia. I'm so sorry about that, but it's just something I have no control over. Okay, so this is dry. And now I can add that extra layer. And you can see, even with the white layer, which is an opaque paint, how much you actually can still see from the texture that's underneath. So just imagine how much you would see from it if I would have put the blue straight on top of that, as it's so translucent. But this should help covering it up more. And of course, I'm always okay with a little bit of the texture showing. I don't need it to be perfectly covered. I actually really like it if it's not too clean and not too perfect. But if I do several layers, I want to make sure that not all of the layers are too how do I say that, too present, too much in your face. There has to be some of them have to be more subtle than others, because if everything is very visible, then you don't have like a nice contrast in textures and colors. So that's why I like to cover it up a little bit more. So if the color is very, very translucent, then I might even need a second layer, but I don't think I'm going to do a second layer here. Actually, I think I like the opacity as it is, which means that I can now remove my circles from my print. Which is actually quite easy, as you can see. And so here is a little bit of the adhesive stayed behind, and here also on the paper instead of on the circle, but I can just rub it away. I have to be a little bit careful because the paint around is not completely dry, but it's better to wait until all of the paint is completely dry, and then you can just rub any leftover adhesive away. So I'm also going to remove these. And again, it would be a shame to clean off that plate. I would rather pull a print using that paint. I think it's dry enough. And I want to add another color, maybe just some white. Oops. And this will also be just a fun background with a circle pattern that I can use in my art journal or as collage material or maybe as a base for a card. So I have a lot of prints like this in a box that I pull out if I want to start a new project. I don't always like to just start from scratch, especially if I don't really know what I want to do or what I want to make. And then I just go through this box with these background prints, and I just pick one that I like, and that's just going to be my starting point. And I just work on top, which works really well for me. So if you want to pull dry paint from the plate, it's very important that your layer of paint that you add is really thin. But mine was just thin enough to pull up everything. And I might even like this one better than that one. I really like also that you can see the texture of the adhesive in there from all the times that the circles already have been used. There's a lot of texture on the circles. So as you can probably imagine, you can continue adding layers and layers to this, as many layers as you like, using the tool, and always have everything within that border and the size of your gel plate. So as I said, you can also do this with the small plates. So if you have the mini plates that are in different sizes, then you can also use the border. And even if you have a circle, you can use the mini placement tool, and you can have all of your prints in exactly the same position, and you don't even have to make sure that the border is always in the same position. So, and to show you how that works, I'm also going to do a couple of prints on some of the mini plates. And I have mine stored in some chocolate tins. So let me see. I wanted to use the circle one. That's then it's in here. The circle one. So you can imagine that if you have another shape, like for instance this one, or even this one, that it doesn't really matter how you put your gel plate, as long as you make sure that you use the mini placement tool always on one of the straight edges, that it will always be in the same position. So as long as you always make sure that it touches here and it touches there, it will always be in the same position. And the same for this shape, for instance, if you put it like this on your paper and you make sure that you put your placement tool all the way into that little corner there, that it will always be in the same position. But how does it work with the circle? So I can put it like this, but next time I put it there, it might be a little bit off, like this or like this. And I'm doing it very much now, but even if it's just a little bit, you might think that it will be off, but that's not the case, because the edge of the paper will always be 1 inch out of the circle, no matter if you put the placement tool like this or you put it like this. It will always be 1 inch out of the edges of the paper. So it doesn't have to be straight to print on a circle in the same position with every layer. And I'm actually going to show you. So if I would have wanted a perfect circle in the middle, exactly in the middle of my paper, then of course I should have measured my little circle. Let's see if I have a ruler here. I do. So my circle, I'm not really sure, but I think, oh, this is centimeters. That's not so handy for you. This is inches. So I would say this is a 3-inch circle, which means that if I want to have a 1-inch border all around, that my paper has to be 5 by 5 inch, because I have to add 2 inches, right, to have it in the middle. But I don't have a cutting machine here, so I'm just going to use this bigger sheet of paper, but it doesn't matter, because it's actually all about showing you that it will be in the same position for every print. So again, let's add the first color and roll it out. I always have a little bit of trouble finding the right amount of paint for such small plates. I often have too much paint, but this looks pretty okay. So I'm just going to make sure that that my placement tool touches the circle on both sides. But it doesn't really matter if I put it like this or I put it like this, as long as it touches both of the sides. And then I put my paper in, same way as I did with the 5 by 7 plate. And in this case, it's not really necessary to mark the paper, as the paper is much bigger. So it's obvious which way around I have to put it in there. But if I would have a really nice 5 by 5 sheet of paper, it could be important. As you can see, there was some leftover paint or ink on the plate that now came up with my paint, which I really like. That's also one of the reasons that I hardly ever really clean my plates, because I like surprises like that in my prints. They make a more interesting print, I think, than when you have like the really clean colors. But of course, that's very personal, and you might think differently. So if you are more of the cleaning type and you really want to clean your plate very well, then just add a few drops of baby oil or vegetable oil, and then take a paper towel and rub in the baby oil. It will remove all of the dirt, all of the color that is left on your plate, and then you can just use a wet cloth and some you can just use a wet cloth and remove the excess oil, and your plate will be as good as new. So now I have some paint there, and I had my tool like this in the first print, and I'm now going to show you when I put it a little bit off, that I will still have the circle in the same position. Oops, I should not move my tool. The only thing is that if I turn it like this, that my bottom part is not going to be really straight underneath my top part. But as long as that is not important, then it doesn't matter. Even if I would put it this way around and put my paper in like this, it will still be within that circle. So as long as you don't use any textures with, for instance, text, that you and then even then, if you want it to be straight in your circle, then you have to make sure that you put the tool straight before you do the printing. For instance, if I have a very old letter stencil here, and I want to use the letters on top of that circle, then I'm just going to roll out some paint again. And this time I want to try and get it as straight as possible. So I'm just going to put my my tool as straight as possible. What I could do, and I'm going to show you with one of the shapes that is where it works a little bit different, is I could mark where I want my tool to be. So that's what I'm going to do in my next print. But first I'm going to finish this one. So, oops, I have to do this the other way around, because otherwise my text will be reversed. And now I want to push this down because I want to pull up some of that paint from the plate with my stencil, but I can't really push it down with my fingers, because then I would go into those open areas and touch the paint that I don't want to touch. So what I like to do is just use an acrylic block if I use stencils or something like this, and I just push it down with the acrylic block, and this way I can be sure that I don't go into those open areas, but I push it hard enough to pick up paint with my stencil, as you can see. Now I'm going to put that tool back there and place my paper on top. And there we go. I have another layer on top of my circle. Now there's one shape where this is not really that simple because it has no straight edges and it's not completely round. So it does matter how you put the paper in the tool to make sure you get it in the same position, and that's the oval. Now you can imagine that if I put my oval like this and my paper is a little bit off, then that also my print would be a little bit off because it is not the same all around. So what I can do if I want to use the oval, and I can also do it when I use my circle and I want to make sure that everything is exactly straight, is to place my oval or my circle exactly where I want it to be. And then I put my tool around it so all sides touch my my gel plate, and then I draw a line on the inside of my placement tool. So I can put it in that same position every time I use it. And then I can make sure that I know for sure that if I put it like this, as you can see, the edge of the tool is not touching the line, the pencil line here, so it will not be straight on my print. And I'm also going to show you that. So I'm just going to show you how it looks when the print is off, and why you should use this little trick if you want to use the oval shape or your circle shape when you want everything to be straight. So first I'm going to put my placement tool exactly on the pencil line and pull that print. So that's my first print. Then I'm going to add another layer in another color. I have a little bit too much paint here. There are two things when you use too much paint. First of all, you won't get a nice texture because whatever tool you use to pick up paint from the plate will not be able to lift up enough of the paint. And the second thing that happens is that a thicker layer of paint will pile up around the edges of the plate, and then when you push down your paper and you rub it, it will kind of squeeze out between your paper and your plate, and you will get this like thicker edge of paint around your print, which is not really nice. So let's do this again. Push it down to remove some of that paint. And now again, I'm going to make sure that my tool is in the right position with the pencil line. So it will be exactly on top of my first print. As you can see, it's perfectly within that oval shape. But what if I don't line it up? And I'm just going to use a purple because that will show probably the best. And I'm going to mess up this print anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So again, rolling out. The paint. And now I'm going to put my tool here, but I still make sure that I touch the edges, but I didn't line it up with my pencil line here. And now what's going to happen is that it's not going to be exactly in the right position because the angle of the tool was not right. And it's not really showing. I didn't, that's funny, because I didn't turn it off enough, and I'm using a color that's completely covering everything up. You don't see it, so maybe I should use another color and do it a little bit. Oops, way too much. So what I'm going to do with that extra paint is roll it out on my other plate, because that's the shame. And probably this is also not a smart move because I'm using white. That's also not really going to show well, I guess, but let's see. It should be more clear now. So I'm just going to put it way off so it makes sense why I put my pencil line there. Yeah, now it does show. As you can see, my oval is now in a totally different area than the first layers. So for that matter, if you have a plate that is not straight or not a perfect shape, then that pencil line can help you out, and you can will still be able to get everything in the same position. So I'm just really quickly going to create some texture in this paint and then just leave it to dry and then pick it up later with a different color so I don't waste all that paint that I put too much on that tiny little gel plate. So this will make a nice print later. I don't think I have any paper here right now that I can use to print on. Oh, I have something here. I might actually. So as you can see, I didn't use the tool here. It's not exactly in the middle, so there's no use in using it now. I'm just going to print this on top, and somehow this will make some collage paper at some point. So this is basically, maybe we can turn the camera again. So okay. So this is basically was showing how to use the placement tool and how handy it can be if you do several layers on top of each other. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something, and I don't think there are any questions because I was not interrupted. So yeah, I hope you will join me again next month for another class. Next month we will do painted flowers on the gel plate. So we're actually going to paint with a brush on the gel plate to create beautiful prints. I hope you will join me again. And for now, I wish you a beautiful day and hopefully see you soon. Bye. Thank you.